All right. This is the big one. Given that these are the three current contract holders of Canada's orbital launch contracts from the D&D, it's a little bit like having Peter Beck, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk for Canada all up on the panel at once. I'll let them figure out who wants to be who, depending on various preferences. But really, it's an honor here. It's a pleasure. I mean, what a great moment to be sitting here with you all as we're starting on this adventure. So we'll start off with just kind of the standard one. Just please introduce yourselves and your company, but also let folks know, where are you based, how many employees you got, some of those basic pieces of information. Let's start there at the far left.
I can go ahead. So Bashar Al-Zain. Well, first, thank you, Raul, for organizing that event. I think it's really exceptional. It's nice to see it grow and all of you here. I know a lot of you guys, so it's like a family reunion in a certain way. So Reaction Dynamics, we manufacture, we are developing containerized rocket systems with orbital launch capabilities. We have leveraged a storable propulsion solution to allow us to enable responsive launch for our customers. We are located in Montreal, in fact, Saint-Hubert to be precise. We are about 52, and if you ask me on Friday, we'll be 55.
Wow, that's great.
Hi there, Hugh Coley, CEO of Canada Rocket Company. I actually toured Bashar's facility a couple weeks ago, and it's amazing, very inspiring, fantastic. Mechanical engineering, built and sold a software company, and have been assembling. We're a team of 20, and we're really focused on medium lift capabilities, about 12,000 kilograms to sun-synchronous orbit. Our engine's about 60 kilonewtons. And we've really assembled a team. We incorporated the company in November. We've raised $23 million to date from investors in Canada and the US. And my CTO, co-founder, was at SpaceX for about a decade, working on Falcon 9 Merlin engines and reusability. And we've assembled folks from Arianespace, Rocket Lab, Blue Origin, a couple others from SpaceX, Pangea Propulsion. We've got 10 Europeans moving from Europe to Toronto, where our facility is based. We've got 6 Canadians coming back from both Europe, Australia, and the US, which is fantastic and great to kind of be part of that movement. And then a couple Canadians who are already at home with rocket experience. So we're really focused on building up the team, the infrastructure. We've got a test facility, a 2-hour drive. We've got an announcement about that coming soon. Launch, more details on that soon as well, and manufacturing in Etobicoke, which is the Greater Toronto area.
Wonderful. Well, I already had a talk, so I won't take up too much time and save our valuable time for the panel. But it's a pleasure to be here on stage with Hugh and Bashar. Nordspace, as you know, based in Markham. We also have our location in Newfoundland, where we're building our launch site in St. Lawrence and St. John's, and we're opening an office in Ottawa later this year, this summer. So we have a lot going on. We'll be about 40 people over the next couple of weeks. Major expansion on all fronts, but you've heard enough about Nordspace, so I want to make sure this is about everyone else too.
No, that's great. And we'll come to you here next, Raul, because you showed a great chart actually in your presentation, which was kind of the estimated cost of all of the new companies that have gone to orbit over the last 15 years. 20 years ago, there weren't really that many new cases. And now we've got a few that are instructive, both from what worked and what didn't work. And so it's a question for all of you, but start with you, Raul. What can Canada and what can your company learn from these multiple different kind of different approaches to realizing orbital launch capabilities that we've seen everywhere from the US to Europe to New Zealand? What lessons do you take away that you think Canada and your company should adopt? What are the lessons that you want to avoid?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Great question. And I think, as an engineer, of course, but as somebody who spent a lot of time in entrepreneurship, I only know one path to building a successful business, as I mentioned earlier, and that's you have to build a business that makes money. And you don't have to necessarily figure that out from the outset for a company as advanced as building orbital rockets, but very quickly you have to figure out how you're going to make money, because at some point, raising private capital, government capital, whatever it is, if you can't deliver on a sustained capability, if you can't survive and be resilient in the face of failure, political headwinds, changing priorities, whatever it may be, then building launch is just so complicated and so challenging that the first sign of trouble will result in basically the entire chart that you saw. So I think resiliency is extremely important. That resiliency only comes if we're being honest about building launch companies. It has to be a company, and by definition, a company needs revenue, profit to succeed. So our focus is on building a real business, not just a rocket company.
There's been a couple learnings. One is, we like to say internally, and I guess externally at this point, is being the most uninnovative launch company is the best way to get to orbit. A lot of companies have tried to really push the needle before they've, let's just say, earned the right, and they haven't got to orbit. So whether that's unique fuel sources, coaxial tanks, 3D printing the entire rocket, launching from planes, balloons, building rockets is a very high-risk endeavor, and adding additional risk onto the technical program really doesn't make sense. So that's one element. The other is capital is very important. It's as important as the engineering challenge, and it's very capital intensive, and having as much capital up front early on in the development period actually allows you to make the right architectural decisions, allows you to be very hardware rich and provide high levels of test cadence, because you're not shy with having to blow up different test articles to an extent, of course. So that's an additional element. And then the third piece is it's all about people. And in all businesses, it all comes down to not just the engineers, but also the technicians. Happy technicians make happy rockets. And I think it's really important that Canada has been an exporter of talent for the last 20 plus years, not just in aerospace, but most other industries. And we really have this opportunity to bring that talent back home that has, they learned their education through university in Canada. They went overseas, learned through rockets and other aerospace programs, and now they have the opportunity to come back and leverage that experience. And it's not just Canadians, it's really anyone who's built rockets before. And I think that's a really important component, that experience, though it's expensive up front, you save a lot down the line because you don't make the mistakes that others have in the past. And that's kind of the three learnings that we're trying to, mistakes we're trying not to make.
I can throw a quick one in there. I think the importance of talking to your customers as your most important stakeholder. One thing we had to fight over the past 9 years has been the perception that only SpaceX can launch satellites, and only a Falcon 9 type rocket is what the industry needs. And every customer we spoke to all had complaints over lead time, or the rocket shakes too much, or whatever. And that's something, having a technical background, there's always that perception that build it and they will come. It's never build it and they will come. Even if you have the best product, you may be designing for the wrong requirements and for the wrong need, because this is what you think your customer needs. You don't know. Talk to them. And that started with us through collecting LOIs, MOUs, all these things, but also engaging discussions about what do you need to see for you to commit and sign a contract. And that really got us into understanding the market in a very, very insightful way, beyond the market analysis that you read, beyond the market studies, the forecast. We can see forecasts and say, okay, this is not going to work because we have inside information about this need and that company that's being started, or this or that. And that really helped us shape what we need to do. Because at the end of the day, if you're not creating value to anyone, you shouldn't exist as a company. I mean, it can be a great scientific project, but if you're really about building a company that will make a difference, you have to create value to someone, be it a product or service. So for us, it has been really talking to customers, understanding what they need very early on, like as early as 2018, talking to them, seeing, what's the price point they care about, what's the lead time they care about, how do they launch, at what frequency, how do they insert their satellites into orbit, how do they deploy, how do they replenish. And really, through that, you can really be in a position where you can, and to be honest, that's the stakeholder that you have to care the most about. If your customers are happy, if they care about what you're doing, it's easy to convince investors. It's easier to convince government for funding. it's easier to hire because you have a business case that really holds. So I think that has been, as a first-time entrepreneur, first job as a CEO of a rocket company, maybe that's not, you have to, you learn a lot by making mistakes. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So Hugh, we'll throw to you here for the first of the challenging questions here. Obviously the Canadian government, I think you would all agree, has done a few things well. What have they maybe not done so well, or what do they still need to do? I mean, you guys are undertaking this incredibly significant challenge. We got a bill, we got contracts. What support and approaches do you think the Canadian government still needs to take, or that you would like to see them take, to make this go faster, to make this go longer? I mean, give us some thoughts on what we still need to do as a country here.
Yeah, it's important to say that I don't think any of us would really be here without the work on the federal government side, provincial. I think it's unheard of, especially for a company as young as ours, to be awarded funds from the D&D, as well as to be permitted to bring in foreign nationals. And I think that speaks to Ottawa's openness to taking risks. And I think that's a great starting point. And it's going to be a very iterative process. There's going to be regulatory approvals that we'll need help with on, the test site, launch site, everything in between. I think the biggest signal that would be enormously helpful is really just anchor contracts. And I think, at least it's my view, that Canada isn't large enough to sustain a significantly sized launch business if it's just Canadian payloads. And that's more so from a venture capital lens, is you could probably sustain the business, but it's not going to generate the returns that will generate the investment that's needed to create that flywheel. So that's one element, and that is inherently the opportunity. And what would be another ask, not just from the Canadian government, but just Canada in general, is we have a real opportunity to capture a significant share of the medium lift launch capability on a global basis. And that's really the opportunity that we should be seizing, is not just building this for Canada, but building it for the world. And if you look at the bifurcation of the market, you've got SpaceX, Blue Origin, Relativity is also up there on large size rockets. Europe's starting to talk about super heavy lift. We were talking about data centers in space. It takes 5 years to get onto a Falcon 9. Launch prices have gone up, 20, 30%, which no one seems to talk about. And meanwhile, we're going to 5x the already projected capacity, demand, and no one else is building rockets because everyone thought it was oversupplied.
The market is solved.
So
Launch is solved. You've heard that a billion times.
A billion times. So it's a real opportunity from a Canadian perspective where we can become global leaders, and there's no reason why Canada can't. And that's where I think the government continuing down that path of showing its seriousness and support, and what we like to say is it starts with sovereignty and then the world. And from a sovereignty perspective, that's what gets the capital flowing into what otherwise a lot of people will say, well, why is Canada building rockets? And this kind of solves that problem. And then once you start introducing the global opportunity, it's kind of, sky's the limit, which I guess is kind of a pun. But I feel like I've been talking too much, and Bashar likely has some.
Yep.
Raul, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I think there's also one extra element that we cannot neglect is the world has changed really quickly in the past year, and Canada being a dependable partner, dependable ally, makes us a sort of a safe haven, if you want, in a certain way. But to complement what you has been saying is you need to be first a sustainable, profitable company before you can really look into defense and defense as a market. You need to have an offer that is distinguished enough to have customers coming to you and saying, you know what, here's my money, launch my satellite. And for what government has done, all government segments have been extremely supportive, be it federal, D&D, CSA, Quebec government, that we would like to thank all of them. I think now it's really up to us to deliver. You know, we can keep asking for stuff, but now we have to build.
Yeah, I mean, we've been engaging Transport Canada, D&D, and all these folks for so many years, and I think one of the best things that they've done is just they've taken us seriously at every single step, including when we were a two-person company, and you know, they listen, their heart's in the right place, they work extremely hard. When I get emails back from folks in the government at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, I didn't expect that from the federal government, to be quite honest. So really impressive from that perspective. What I do think is that we have a real opportunity here and to make Canada extremely favorable to launch from a policy and a regulatory standpoint, which doesn't really cost much more. It's just about making sure that we're applying the right framework to a nascent launch country like like Canada. So a lot of what we're doing right now is leveraging, say, Part 450 in the United States and what they're doing as inspiration for what we're doing here in Canada. But the problem is they've had decades to mature their frameworks, and they've made all the mistakes, and we have very small teams here right now in Canada and the federal government working on the launch file. So we may end up with something that's just simply unenforceable. The real challenge with rockets also in general is that the margins are so slim, not just the technical margins, but the financial margins. You're working, you know, like, again, you look at Rocket Lab, they're not profitable on Electron yet. They might get there, I think, in another launch or two, if I understand correctly, but that's 90 launches in. And they're launching out of New Zealand, where their insurance backstop is, you know, so small compared to what we may have here in Canada. If we get launch insurance wrong, we basically could develop a rocket launch capability here in Canada, and it could be dead on arrival because our margins may be 5%, maybe less, maybe negative. And it's really important. You look at, like, say, maximum probable loss calculations and all of that, to apply it in the right way for where Canada is from a launch perspective and do it right. So if there's one thing that I think we haven't done great, or at least I haven't seen it, is I haven't seen it been vocalized that we're looking to make Canada a place where launch is favorable, not just possible. Everything right now is like, how do we just make it work? How do we keep everyone safe? Super important. But we can actually do a lot of things at this early stage to make Canada the most friendly place on Earth to launch from. And I think that'll go a very long way for everybody.
That's great, and great insight on the insurance, too. When we were looking at commercial low Earth orbit space stations at NASA, one of the issues that people hadn't accounted for was the insurance rates. And some of the premiums that were being cited was potentially up to 25% for the first year, which would potentially destroy their business case. So it really is a key part, so it's a great one to raise. Want to get into, you know, this question around what is a sovereign launch capability. We use that word, but what is the definition? Here you mentioned you've got foreign nationals working on it, so it doesn't mean just only Canadians working on it, right? What components, what are the elements of sovereignty that you all think is the defining piece that you're approaching this with for the country? So Rahul, and we'll go down.
I mean, you know, we live in a global world, and I think that's very exciting. That's what actually, I believe, is what's enabling this opportunity. I mean, we have the advantage, second mover advantage. We get to see, even from afar, how other countries and companies have succeeded or failed. That alone, you know, we're not living in this bubble as Canadians. We see what's going on. We can bring in talent and all of that. I would say that for us, sovereign launch is launching Canadian payloads from Canadian-made rockets from Canadian soil. If we miss any of those three pieces, it is not really a sovereign launch capability at all. We're fundamentally dependent on another country or another company to make those decisions for us, and it's just a house of cards. The thing that I think is the most important, though, is the rocket itself. This is the hardest part of the sovereign launch equation. And if we're bringing rockets in from outside, that's a great potential stepping stone, but fundamentally, that's not going to be a sovereign launch capability. So if that's, you know, we have to work as fast as we can, our three companies, and anyone else, to fill that gap and make Canadian rockets that are made here in Canada. Could be from talent around the world, but made in Canada, supply chains primarily Canadian, assembled in Canada, launched from Canada, but they have to be Canadian rockets.
Yeah, would love to get a definition of sovereignty. I think the core thing from at least our perspective is sovereignty is all about control. So you could build it in Canada, you could design it in Canada, but if your flight computer is sourced from some nation, and we saw this with COVID-19, all of a sudden, supply chains get compressed, and now you can't fly. So I think it really is an important question to raise early, because as you're designing, you're probably going to be designing a suboptimal rocket, engine, et cetera, and over-optimizing for, and I saw it in one of the presentations too, building a very indigenously Canadian vehicle. So that's everything from a manufacturing capability, maybe your airframe's a bit thicker, so that you can leverage some existing Canadian capabilities, so you don't have to bring technicians and expertise from around the world, because you just don't know what happens. So I think strategically, that's ultimately how we view sovereignty. I think Canada, it makes sense in terms of bringing in international vehicles, but it does not make sense to have those supersede a Canadian-led initiative. And we saw that with Avro Aero. I think anytime you bring up the Avro Aero in aerospace circles, everyone kind of cringes, and I think this is our moment to not repeat history. And the economic benefits are substantial, and there's a 5-to-1 investment in launch vehicles into the broader space economy. And there's a CTV special a week or two ago where they talked about Canada's space economy actually declined over the last 5-6 years. And if the space economy is going to be $1 trillion in 10 years, or 5 years, $2 trillion and give or take 10, and Canada isn't actively participating in that, I think it's more than just sovereignty. It's also participating in what will be another massive wave of innovation. And I think that's another point that everyone needs to really focus in on, is yes, national security, yes, sovereignty, but also let's help the Canadian economy and the Canadian people compete on a global basis.
Right.
For sure.
Sovereignty means having the optionality, is having the ability to make a decision that is in the country's interest, irrespective of who we're working with and who's our allies. And in some cases, a decision that's made in Canadian interest doesn't necessarily mean it will be in some of our allies' interest. Sovereignty means having that option to decide for ourselves, to decide what is good for us, not having to ask permission. Is, let's say now we're pushing on launch and we have identified the need and we have to build a rocket that has whatever payload capacity, whatever diameter, what if that changes? Where that decision will be made? Is it going to be made in Ottawa, or is it going to be made somewhere else? And that's, I think, what sovereignty means. At the end of the day, it's Canadian-owned, controlled, manufactured, assembled, designed, because if you need to change your design, does it mean you have to ask permission from someone? And what if that permission doesn't come? And I think this is really what's hard. Like, we cannot import something and slap a flag on it and call it Canadian. And I know it's very tempting because it's an easier option to do. But that's, I think, where we're all aligned on this, as in, it's hard. We're going to crush a few rockets, and it's okay. And it's totally okay. Like, this is, if launching was easy, everybody would launch. Everybody would have that path to orbit. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really build an industry in the country means we have to accept that it's difficult, means we have to accept that we'll go fast and we'll be able to deliver on that. But it's going to take more attempts than we like. Some ADMs will be a bit nervous, and that's okay. And that's okay.
Can I just disagree? We all agree on pretty much everything. And I think that one of the things, though, on the talent piece that's really important, at least in our case, is that if you're gathering lots of engineers from somewhere else in the world and bringing them here, they're coming to work on a rocket, maybe for high pay or whatever it may be, but are they really aligned with the mission? The reason I think all three of us here, and yourself, Alex, as well, we care about Canada. This is our home. This is the only home I know. This is why myself and pretty much every engineer on our team from coast to coast to coast who've come to Ontario to build rockets are building rockets because they care about Canada and about bringing sovereign launch to Canada, because this is their home too. Now, certainly we have engineers from all over the world as well, but we have to be really careful about the fundamental philosophy that's driving the talent pool for any company in Canada working on any sort of a sovereign capability. If they don't care about the country, I don't know if they sustain through the years ahead where somebody else might come along and starting up another rocket company somewhere else in the world and just pick up that talent because they're not tied down to anything else.
We mentioned the challenges ahead, so we got a couple more minutes here. Just very briefly, what are the technical milestones that we should all be looking to you to see whether you realize them or not over the next 12 to 24 months? And then the ultimate question, when will you have payload to orbit? So, Rahul, and then down the line.
2028, that's the target that the DND has given us, and we're very serious about achieving that. To be clear, it'll be the fastest pretty much any company would have achieved orbit on the smallest budget from a national investment standpoint as a percentage of the overall investment required for a capability like that, but we accept that challenge and we're working around the clock to make that happen. The biggest technical milestones are certainly propulsion development, primary structures. These are where so much of our focus is right now. Testing infrastructure, so you should be seeing an orbital engine test and various versions of that. You should be seeing flight scale hardware, interstages, tanks, and all of that. And in our case specifically, you should see a scaled space systems division so that we have internal demand ready when launch is ready as well.
We've got a gas generator test at our upcoming test facility at the end of this year. Turbo machinery developments, typically in 18 months if you take the most ambitiously but achievable milestones. Luckily, we have someone from Ariane Group who designed the turbo machinery components for the Prometheus engine, which is very similar in thrust class to what we're building. And then very similar across the various different subsystems. Ultimately, on the medium lift side, it's a plus or minus 8-year journey. And then every orbital launch program has taken about 2 years to get to a commercial cadence. Typically, you do one orbital launch, depending on how that goes. You do a subsequent one in about 12 months' time, 6 to 12 months, and then you're starting to hit orbital cadence from that perspective.
We're definitely aiming for Q4 2028. On the technical milestones, I mean, I can spend an hour. I will spare you the details, but yeah, exactly. And I agree with both Rahul and Hugh, as in you gotta push for engine testing. You design your rocket around the performance of your engine. You fix your allocated baseline based on what the engine can really deliver, not what you think it can deliver, what it really delivers, because engines have a mind of their own often, and ensuring that you have flight weight tanks, components, propellant tanks, avionic architecture that's really fixed, and something that really holds. And I think the key milestones will be completing integrated stage tests of each of these stages, ensuring you have a full duration burn of your engine, ensuring that you're kicking that engine really well, because you have to make sure how will it operate when it's off pressure, how will it operate when it's off mixture ratio, all these things, and really having a plan to scale, because this is important. This is really important. I think if we are to make Canada as a launch destination, we need to make sure that we are able to address the needs of Canada, but also our allies.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are all behind you. This is a pretty good Team Canada. There are very few punches thrown, so maybe we're not quite at playoff hockey yet, but we're in a pretty good regular season start. Godspeed to you all. Thank you for all you are doing to get Canada into orbit. We're very grateful, and please give it up for the CEOs of our launch companies.